The Galactic Council chambers hummed with the soft vibrations of 1,000 different breathing patterns, each species contributing their own unique rhythm to the symphony of interstellar diplomacy. Ambassador Sarah Chun of Terra sat quietly in the human delegation's modest section, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching as the various alien representatives argued over trade routes and mining rights with the passionate intensity that only came from centuries of careful, civilized debate. To her left, the crystalline Vector delegation chimed their disagreement in harmonious tones that sounded like wind through a cathedral. Across the chamber, the amphibious Mordun croaked their counter-proposals with wet, throaty sounds that their translation devices rendered into perfectly reasonable economic arguments. Everyone was so wonderfully civilized, so refreshingly diplomatic. Sarah smiled softly, the expression never quite reaching her eyes. The current debate centered around the recently discovered Kepler 442 system, rich in rare Earth elements and perfectly positioned along 3 major trade routes. 17 different species had filed claims, each backed by centuries of legal precedent and diplomatic tradition. The arguments have been going on for 6 standard months now, with each species taking turns to present their case in the most polite, measured tones imaginable. The unified Zephyrian Commonwealth respectfully submits that our exploration vessels first detected the system's quantum signature. Drone Ambassador Zaeth, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered emphatic speech. By the ancient laws of stellar discovery, first detection grants primary claim privileges. A gentle wave of agreement rippled through the chamber, though Sarah noticed it was rather lukewarm. The Zephyrians' claim was technically sound but hardly compelling. They detected the system from 3 parsecs away using their advanced sensor arrays, but hadn't actually visited it. In galactic law, that was like claiming ownership of a house because you'd seen it from across the street. With profound respect to our Zephyrian colleagues, interjected matriarch Siluna of the Ethereal Collective, her voice carrying the musical quality that made her species such effective mediators. Detection without investigation hardly constitutes meaningful discovery. Our scientific expeditions conducted detailed surveys of 4 planets within the system, surely granting us superior claim under the exploration protocols of the Third Galactic Accord. More murmurs of consideration echoed through the chamber. The Ethereals had a stronger case, certainly. They'd actually sent ships to the system, conducted surveys, even established a small research outpost on the outermost planet. But the Kethran hegemony had countered that claim by pointing out that the research outpost was temporary and had been abandoned when the scientists found nothing immediately interesting. Sarah watched it all with the patient expression of someone attending a mildly interesting lecture. She'd seen this same dance performed dozens of times since humanity had joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago. Species would present their claims, other species would present counterclaims, committees would be formed to study the matter, subcommittees would be formed to study the committee's findings, and eventually, after years of deliberation, some compromise would be reached that satisfied no one, but offended no one either. It was all very proper, very civilized, very gentle. The human delegation consisted of just 3 beings in the vast chamber designed to house thousands. Ambassador Chun, her aide David Martinez, and their cultural attaché, Dr. Elizabeth Kurowski. Humanity had been granted a small voice in galactic affairs after their rather dramatic first contact 5 years ago, though most species still regarded them as charming primitives who'd somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel through a combination of stubbornness and blind luck. The official story, carefully crafted by human diplomats and gladly accepted by alien counterparts, was that humanity had developed their crude but effective jump drive through decades of patient scientific research. They were portrayed as a young species, eager to learn from their more advanced galactic neighbors, grateful for the opportunity to participate in the grand community of civilized worlds. David leaned over to whisper in Sarah's ear. The Kethrans are about to make their play. Look at how their ambassador is positioning her manipulation tentacles. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly. Ambassador Geltar of the Kethran hegemony was indeed shifting in her hover seat, her 7 manipulator appendages arranging themselves in the pattern that indicated a formal challenge was forthcoming. The Kethrans were one of the older species in the Council, their claims always backed by extensive legal research and centuries of precedent. Honored colleagues, Geltar's translator rendered her bioelectric communications in a standard galactic. While we deeply respect both the Zephyrian detection and the ethereal surveys, we must respectfully point out that neither constitutes permanent settlement as defined by the Colonial Establishment Accords. Our own expedition established mining operations on 3 separate asteroid fields within the system, operations that have been ongoing for 7 standard months. A much stronger wave of acknowledgement passed through the chamber. The Kethrans had played their hand well, waiting until the other major claimants had presented their arguments before revealing they'd already begun extracting resources. In galactic law, active resource extraction trumped both detection and surveying. However, Geltar continued, her tentacles weaving through the air in patterns that indicated magnanimous compromise. The hegemony recognizes the validity of our colleagues' claims and proposes a joint venture. Shared extraction rights, with profits distributed according to a formula that takes into account detection priority, survey contribution, and establishment investment. Sarah had to admire the Kethran strategy. They'd effectively claimed the system while simultaneously offering to share it, putting themselves in the position of generous benefactors rather than greedy grabbers. Other species would be able to claim they'd won concessions from the hegemony, while the Kethrans maintained operational control and the largest profit share. The human delegation, announced Council Moderator Pelthak, his gas-filled translation sphere bobbing gently in the chamber's artificial gravity. You have remained silent throughout these proceedings. Do you wish to present a claim or observation regarding the Kepler 442 system? All eyes, sensors, and various other detection organs turned toward the small human section. Sarah rose gracefully, smoothing down her simple but elegant diplomatic robes. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5.5 feet tall, with graying brown hair and the kind of unremarkable features that made her easy to overlook in a crowd. Perfect for a diplomat. Honorable moderator, esteemed colleagues, she began, her voice carrying the careful, measured tones she'd perfected over decades of diplomatic service. Humanity is deeply grateful for the opportunity to observe these proceedings. We have much to learn from the wisdom and experience of our galactic neighbors. Warm approval radiated from the assembled species. The humans were always so properly humble, so eager to learn. It was quite endearing, really. We do not wish to present a claim at this time, Sarah continued, and several aliens relaxed noticeably. The humans knew their place, understood that they were too young and inexperienced to compete with established galactic powers. However, we would like to request permission to send a small scientific expedition to study the system's unique stellar formations. Purely for research purposes, of course, and only with the permission of whatever authority is established through your wise deliberations. A most reasonable request, declared Matriarch Siluna immediately. The Ethereal Collective would be honored to grant research permissions to our human friends, as would the hegemony, added Ambassador Geltar, not to be outdone in generosity toward the harmless humans. The Zephyrian Commonwealth seconds this sentiment, chimed in Zareth. Sarah bowed slightly to each delegation in turn. Humanity thanks you for your kindness and wisdom. She sat down to a gentle wave of approval that bordered on the patronizing. The humans had played their role perfectly, asking for nothing more than permission to observe and learn. So humble, so appropriate for such a young species. David Martinez watched the continuing debate with the expression of someone following a particularly complex game whose rules he was still learning. Dr. Kurowski took careful notes on her tablet, occasionally glancing up to study the body language and vocal patterns of various species. To any observer, they looked like exactly what they claimed to be, young diplomats from a primitive world struggling to understand the complexities of galactic civilization. The debate continued for another 3 hours, with various species presenting minor claims and counterclaims, until finally, Moderator Pelthak called for a recess to allow the major claimants time to negotiate the details of the Kethran proposal. The chamber began to empty as delegates filed out in small groups, discussing the day's proceedings in the dozen languages that served as diplomatic lingua francas. Sarah gathered her materials slowly, taking her time as the chamber cleared. Only when the vast space held just a few stragglers did she allow her expression to change. The polite, diplomatic smile faded, replaced by something that would have made any human immediately take a step back. Her eyes went flat and calculating, like a shark deciding whether something was worth the energy to eat. "Well," she said quietly to her companions, "that went exactly as expected." David checked his tablet, running through the data they'd gathered. Mining rights split 4 ways, with the Kethrans taking 47%, Ethereals getting 23%, Zephyrians getting 18%, and various minor stakeholders splitting the remainder. Resource extraction timeline. Sarah asked. They'll spend another 8 months negotiating the exact details of the sharing agreement, then another 6 months establishing the Joint Oversight Commission, then maybe 2 years getting operations fully online. Conservative estimate puts meaningful resource extraction at 3 years minimum. Dr. Kurowski looked up from her notes. The Kethrans are already mining, of course. They'll continue their operations during the negotiation period, which means they'll have extracted roughly 67% of the easily accessible resources by the time the joint venture is operational. Sarah nodded approvingly. And their reaction to our research request? Perfectly predicted, David replied. They see it as appropriate humility from a junior member species. None of them considers scientific research a threat to mining operations. The concept that anyone might want anything other than immediate resource extraction never even occurred to them. Cultural blind spot, Dr. Kurowski observed. Every major species in the Council has followed the same basic development pattern. Discover FDL travel, join the galactic community, integrate into existing economic and political structures. They've all been doing this dance for so long, they can't imagine anyone approaching it differently. Sarah stood, straightening her robes with movements that suddenly seemed much more predatory than diplomatic. The research vessel opportunity will be in the Kepler 442 system within 6 weeks, with full diplomatic authorization from 4 separate galactic powers. Dr. Yanez and her team will have 18 months to conduct their stellar formation studies before anyone thinks to check on them. And the mining platforms? David asked. Unfortunate accidents happen in space. Equipment failures, navigation errors, simple human incompetence. By the time anyone realizes what's occurring, the system will be fully under human control with enough defensive infrastructure to make dislodging us expensive. Dr. Kurowski smiled, and the expression transformed her grandmotherly features into something that belonged on a wolf. The best part is they'll never see it coming. To them, we're just eager students who occasionally make embarrassing mistakes due to our primitive technology. Sarah Chun, ambassador of Terra, picked up her diplomatic case and headed for the exit. Behind her polite mask, she was already planning the next phase of humanity's expansion into galactic civilization. The other species had made a fundamental error in their assessment of her people. They'd confused diplomacy with weakness, mistook careful observation for passive acceptance. Humanity hadn't stumbled into FDL travel through luck and persistence. They'd taken it. The wreckage of the Zephyrian survey ship that had first detected Earth was still drifting in dark space beyond Pluto. Its crew preserved in the vacuum after their life support had mysteriously failed during what they'd thought was a routine first contact mission. But that was ancient history now, 5 years past and carefully buried. What mattered was the future, and the future belonged to the species that understood a simple truth that their galactic neighbors had forgotten over centuries of civilized discourse. Sometimes, the most successful predators were the ones that didn't look dangerous until it was far too late to run. Dr. Carmen Yanez stood on the bridge of the research vessel Opportunity, watching the Kepler 442 system grow larger on the main display as they dropped out of their final jump. To anyone monitoring their approach, they looked exactly like what their transponder claimed. A small human scientific expedition, bumbling along in a converted cargo hauler that had been hastily retrofitted with sensor arrays and research equipment. The ship's actual capabilities were somewhat more impressive than its appearance suggested. Sensor sweep complete, reported Lieutenant Torres from a navigation station, though his official title was Graduate Research Assistant, according to their diplomatic cover. 4 active mining platforms in the asteroid belt, exactly where intelligence indicated. Kethran design, basic defensive systems, skeleton crews. Dr. Yanez nodded thoughtfully, maintaining her cover even though she knew no one was monitoring their internal communications. Good habits kept people alive, and she'd been keeping people alive for a very long time. At 63, she was one of the oldest active field operatives in the Human Intelligence Service, with silver hair and laugh lines that made her look exactly like everyone's favorite university professor. The reality was somewhat different. "Any sign they've detected us?" she asked, settling into the captain's chair that was labeled as Chief Research Coordinator in the ship's official documentation. "Negative. We're showing up as exactly what we're supposed to be, a small research ship with primitive sensors and basic propulsion. They've logged our presence and assigned us a standard monitoring classification. No additional scrutiny." "Excellent. Begin the survey pattern, full spectrum analysis of the stellar formation as per our approved research mandate. Make sure we look busy and harmless." The opportunity began its slow, methodical survey of the Kepler 442 system, following exactly the kind of research pattern that a genuine human scientific expedition would employ. Their movements were careful and predictable, their sensor sweeps limited to the passive arrays that their diplomatic clearance authorized them to use. What the Kethran monitoring stations didn't realize was that those primitive sensors were actually the most advanced stealth reconnaissance array that human technology could produce. Every asteroid was mapped and cataloged, every energy signature recorded, every communication frequency monitored and analyzed. Within 72 hours, the humans had a more complete picture of the system's defenses and resources than the Kethrans had developed in 7 months of occupation. The mining platforms were impressive examples of galactic engineering, each one a small city floating in space with the capability to process entire asteroids into refined materials. Their defensive systems were equally sophisticated. Energy shields that could deflect anything short of a direct hit from a capital ship's main weapons, point defense arrays that could track and destroy incoming missiles, and automated patrol craft that could respond to threats anywhere in the belt within minutes. By the standards of galactic civilization, they were essentially impregnable. Only a fleet of ships could hope to take them by force, and even then, the cost would be enormous. By human standards, they were sitting ducks. The problem with peaceful civilizations, Dr. Yanez explained to her team during their daily briefing session, is that they've forgotten how to think like hunters. They designed their defenses to repel the kind of honorable, straightforward attacks that civilized species might launch after years of failed negotiations and formal declarations of hostile intent. She brought up a holographic display showing the detailed scans of Mining Platform Alpha, the largest and most heavily defended of the Kethran installations. "Look at this shield configuration. Incredibly sophisticated, designed to absorb and deflect massive amounts of energy. It could probably withstand a sustained bombardment from a dozen heavy cruisers." Lieutenant Torres studied the display with the expression of someone solving an interesting puzzle. "But the generators are all external, mounted on the platform's superstructure for easy maintenance access." "Exactly. And the point defense systems are calibrated to track objects moving at standard missile velocities with standard energy signatures." Dr. Yanez highlighted several components on the display. "They've optimized everything to defend against the kind of weapons that appear in galactic military databases, which don't include kinetic penetrators launched from modified mining charges," observed Chief Petty Officer Kim from her position at the weapons station. The weapons station that was officially labeled as Geological Analysis Array in all their documentation. Dr. Yanez smiled the warm, maternal smile that had put countless colleagues at ease over the decades, right up until the moment they realized their mistake. The Kethrans are excellent engineers. They've built their defenses to repel exactly the kind of attack they expect to face. Unfortunately for them, humans have a talent for approaching problems from unexpected directions. The plan was elegantly simple, which made it almost impossible for the galactic powers to detect or counter. The opportunity would continue its legitimate research mission, slowly gathering the data that would justify the next phase of human expansion. Meanwhile, her crew would plan a series of modified mining charges throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as research beacons monitoring gravitational anomalies. Each charge contained a small kinetic penetrator no larger than a pencil, accelerated by a miniature mass driver to a significant percentage of light speed. At that velocity, a pencil-sized projectile carried more kinetic energy than most ship-to-ship missiles, and It would be essentially invisible to detection systems designed to track conventional weapons. The beauty of the system was that it would look like a series of unfortunate accidents. Mining platforms had complex systems operating under extreme conditions, and sometimes things went wrong. A small breach in the wrong place, a cascade failure in the power grid, life support systems mysteriously developing fatal flaws. These things happened, especially when operated by relatively inexperienced crews. Remember, Dr. Yanez told her team as they prepared to begin the operation's second phase. We're not just taking control of this system. We're establishing a pattern that will be repeated throughout human expansion. Every system we move into will follow the same basic template. Legitimate scientific research, unfortunate accidents, and gradual assumption of control by the only species competent enough to prevent further tragedies. The psychological warfare aspect was just as important as the physical destruction. When the first mining platform suffered a catastrophic failure, human rescue ships would be the first to respond. Human medical teams would treat the survivors, human engineers would analyze the wreckage, and human administrators would temporarily take over operations to prevent similar disasters. By the time the galactic powers realized what was happening, dozens of systems would be under de facto human control, protected by defensive networks that looked like scientific installations and rescue stations, but could obliterate any fleet that approached without authorization. "Contact from Mining Platform Alpha," reported Torres, interrupting Dr. Yanez's planning session. Standard diplomatic greeting, welcoming us to the system and offering assistance if needed. Respond with appropriate gratitude and humility, Dr. Yanez instructed. Thank them for their kindness and assure them that our small research mission won't interfere with their important work. The communication that went out was a perfect example of human diplomatic protocol. Respectful, slightly self-deprecating, full of praise for Kethran engineering expertise and gratitude for their patience with primitive human technology. The Kethran response was equally polite, offering to provide detailed system maps to help the humans avoid any dangerous areas. Dr. Yanez accepted the offer with apparent enthusiasm, knowing that the maps would provide the final pieces of intelligence her team needed to complete their mission planning. The Kethrans were helping to seal their own fate, and they had no idea they were doing it. Phase 2 begins tonight, she announced to her crew. Remember, we're clumsy humans operating equipment we don't fully understand. If anyone asks, our mining charges are experimental research devices designed to study gravitational wave propagation in asteroid fields. The fact that they occasionally malfunction and cause explosions is simply an unfortunate side effect of our primitive technology. Chief Kim brought up the targeting solution on her console, highlighting the precise locations where the charges would need to be placed for maximum effect. Estimated timeline for complete system takeover: 6 weeks for the mining platforms, another month to establish permanent defensive positions, and perhaps 3 months to fully integrate the resource extraction infrastructure into human logistics networks. Dr. Yanez studied the tactical display with the satisfaction of someone who had planned a perfect operation. By the time the Galactic Council realizes what's happened, we'll be offering to sell them refined materials from the system at competitive prices. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Humanity would destroy the existing mining operations, take control of the system, and then offer to sell the extracted resources back to the species they displaced. The galactic powers would be faced with a choice: start a war over a single system, or accept the new reality and hope to negotiate better terms for future disputes. Dr. Yanez knew which option they'd choose. Galactic civilization had been peaceful for too long, had grown too comfortable with diplomatic solutions, and negotiated compromises. The idea of actually fighting a war over resources was so foreign to their thinking that they'd rationalize accepting the human takeover as a regrettable but understandable mistake. After all, humans were still learning galactic customs. These tragic accidents were probably just the result of inexperience and primitive technology. Better to work with them to prevent future incidents than to escalate into actual conflict. Dr. Yanez, Torres called from his station. We're receiving a broad-spectrum transmission from the outer system. It's a distress call. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They were supposed to be the only human ship in the system, conducting a peaceful research mission under diplomatic protection. A distress call meant something had gone wrong, possibly catastrophically wrong. Source and nature of the distress signal. Dr. Yanez asked, her voice remaining calm despite the ice forming in her stomach. It's human origin, Torres replied, his face pale as he worked his instruments. Ship designation Phoenix. Registry number indicates it's a civilian transport. They're reporting catastrophic system failures and requesting immediate assistance. Dr. Yanez closed her eyes for a moment, running through possibilities and contingencies. The Phoenix wasn't supposed to exist. Human operations in this system were limited to the opportunity and her crew. Either someone had massively screwed up the operational planning, or something much worse was happening. Plot an intercept course, she ordered. Full speed, but maintain our cover as a research vessel responding to a humanitarian crisis. As the opportunity changed course toward the distress signal, Dr. Yanez found herself facing the first serious complication in what should have been a perfectly planned operation. In her decades of experience, she'd learned that complications usually meant someone was about to die, and it was rarely the people who deserved it. The hunt for Kepler 442 had suddenly become much more interesting. The Phoenix was not what Dr. Yanez had expected to find when they reached the distress signal's coordinates. Instead of a crippled transport ship, they discovered a sleek vessel that looked nothing like any human design in the official databases. Its hull was an almost organic flowing curve of dark metal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the system's starlight, and its proportions suggested both speed and lethal efficiency. That's not one of ours, Lieutenant Torres stated the obvious, though his voice carried undertones that suggested he was reaching some uncomfortable conclusions. Dr. Yanez studied the alien ship through the opportunity sensors, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. The vessel was broadcasting a human distress signal using proper identification codes, but it was clearly not of human construction. That left several possibilities, none of them particularly comforting. Any response to our approach? She asked. Negative. They're still broadcasting the automated distress call, but no direct communication attempts. Life signs. Chief Kim worked her sensors for several minutes before responding. Difficult to tell. The hull composition is interfering with our scans, but I'm reading what might be organic activity in what looks like the command section. Dr. Yanez made a decision that went against 30 years of intelligence training. Instead of maintaining distance and calling for backup, she ordered the opportunity to close to docking range. Sometimes, when faced with the unknown, the best approach was to gather information directly rather than speculating from a distance. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth, as if the alien vessel had been designed to interface with human ships. Magnetic clamps engaged with satisfying clicks. Atmosphere readings showed compatible pressure and composition, and the airlock cycled through its sequence without any of the complications that usually accompanied first contact with unknown technology. Dr. Yanez led a small team aboard the Phoenix, armed with standard research equipment that could double as weapons if necessary. What they found in the alien ship's corridors challenged every assumption they'd made about their mission. The interior design was unmistakably alien, with curved walls and ambient lighting that seemed to emerge from the structure itself rather than discrete fixtures. But scattered throughout the ship were pieces of clearly human technology: computer terminals, weapon systems, communication arrays, and life support equipment that Dr. Yanez recognized from military specifications. This is wrong, Chief Kim muttered as they made their way toward the command section. All wrong. These systems should be incompatible, but they're integrated like they were designed to work together. They found the answer in the Phoenix's main control room, where a figure in a dark environmental suit was slumped over what appeared to be a navigation console. The suit's helmet bore the insignia of a human intelligence service, and when Dr. Yanez checked the identification codes, they matched those of Agent Michael Reese, who, according to official records, had been killed in action 18 months earlier. Yanez! The figure stirred as they approached, raising his head with obvious difficulty. Thank God. I wasn't sure the distress beacon would reach you in time. Dr. Yanez kept her weapon ready while studying the man who was supposed to be dead. Agent Reese looked exactly as she remembered him from their brief collaboration on the Proxima Centauri operation, down to the scar on his left temple from a training accident years earlier. You're supposed to be dead, Michael, she said quietly. killed when the research station at Wolf 359 suffered a catastrophic decompression. Reese laughed, though the sound carried no humor. The official story. Yeah, I know what the files say. The reality is somewhat more complicated. He gestured around the alien command center with movements that seemed both human and not quite human at the same time. We've been operating under some incorrect assumptions about humanity's place in galactic civilization. The truth is considerably more disturbing than our worst intelligence estimates suggested. Dr. Yanez felt ice forming in her stomach as implications began clicking into place. Explain. The ship I'm sitting in belongs to a species called the Devourers. They're not part of the Galactic Council, don't appear in any official databases, and, according to everything we thought we knew, they shouldn't exist. Reese activated a holographic display that showed star charts unlike anything in human databases. They've been watching galactic civilization for millennia, studying the various species, learning their weaknesses. The star charts showed trade routes, military installations, and population centers for dozens of species throughout known space. But overlaid on the familiar galactic map were markers indicating something else entirely: hunting grounds. The Devourers are apex predators, Dr. Yanez. They don't conquer territory or extract resources the way the Council species do. They consume other civilizations entirely, absorbing their knowledge, their technology, their biological and cultural distinctiveness. Chief Kim studied the tactical displays with growing horror. How long have they been operating? Based on the archives I've accessed, they've completely consumed at least 47 separate civilizations over the past 10,000 years. Species that the Galactic Council believes simply withdrew from galactic society or chose isolationism were actually hunted to extinction. Dr. Yanez felt the carefully constructed framework of her understanding beginning to collapse. Everything they thought they knew about galactic politics, about humanity's strategic position, about the nature of interstellar civilization itself, was built on fundamentally flawed assumptions. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "And why are you alive when you're supposed to be dead?" Reese's expression grew darker. If such a thing were possible. Because 18 months ago, a Devourer infiltration team targeted our operation at Wolf 359. They killed my entire team and took our place, using some kind of biological mimicry that's essentially perfect. I only survived because I was off-ship when they hit. The implications hit Dr. Yanez like a physical blow. If the Devourers could perfectly mimic human appearance and behavior, then any human agent could be compromised without anyone knowing. Worse, if they've been operating for 18 months with access to human intelligence service protocols and databases, how much do they know about our operations? She asked. Everything, Reese replied grimly. Base locations, agent identities, operational procedures, strategic objectives. They've been feeding information back to the main Devourer fleet while maintaining perfect operational cover. Dr. Yanez looked around the alien ship with new understanding. This vessel, you stole it. Captured it during a reconnaissance mission that went badly wrong. The crew didn't survive the encounter, but I managed to access their navigation systems and communication arrays. That's how I learned what we're really facing. The holographic display shifted to show new information: fleet movements, staging areas, and what appeared to be a massive military buildup in the empty space between galactic spiral arms. Hundreds of ships, each larger than anything in the Council fleets, positioned for what could only be described as an invasion. They're not just hunting individual civilizations anymore, Reese explained. The Devourers have decided that galactic civilization has grown large enough and stable enough to be worth harvesting in its entirety. They're planning to move against all Council species simultaneously. Chief Kim studied the tactical projections with the expression of someone watching her own execution being planned. Timeline. Based on their communications, the main assault begins in approximately 8 months. They'll hit every major population center and military installation in coordinated strikes designed to prevent any effective resistance. Dr. Yanez felt the weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. Everything they'd planned for the Kepler 442 system, all of humanity's careful expansion strategies, suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate in the face of an existential threat that dwarfed anything they'd imagined. "What do you recommend?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We abort the current operation immediately and return to Earth with this intelligence. Humanity needs to prepare for a war unlike anything we've ever faced, and we have less than 8 months to do it. The Galactic Council needs to be warned, Chief Kim pointed out. Reese shook his head. The Council species have been peaceful for so long, they've forgotten how to fight effectively. Their military doctrine is designed around deterrence and limited conflicts, not survival against an extinction-level threat. Warning them might actually make things worse by causing panic and disorganized responses. Dr. Yanez walked to the Phoenix's main view screen, staring out at the stars of the Kepler 442 system, where Kethran miners continued their work in blissful ignorance of the approaching storm. In a few hours, she planned to begin the operation that would give humanity control of this system through carefully orchestrated accidents and diplomatic maneuvering. Now, she was contemplating something far more drastic. Michael, she said quietly, how much do we know about Devourer technology and tactics? Enough to understand that conventional resistance is hopeless. They've been studying galactic civilization for millennia. They know every weakness, every standard response. Any defense based on known technology and tactics will fail. Dr. Yanez turned back to face her team, and they saw something in her expression that made them all take an unconscious step backward. The polite, maternal research coordinator had vanished, replaced by something that belonged in humanity's darker, evolutionary past. Then, we don't use conventional resistance, she said quietly. We do what humans have always done when faced with superior predators. She activated her communication system, sending a coded message that would reach Earth in 6 weeks, and set in motion preparations for a war that would determine whether humanity survived the next year. Dr. Yanez? Torres asked, what are your orders? She looked around the alien ship with its hybrid technology and its archives full of the extinction records of 47 civilizations, and made a decision that would reshape galactic history. We become better predators. 6 months later, the Galactic Council chambers had never seen anything quite like the emergency session that Ambassador Sarah Chun had requested. Representatives from 43 species filled the vast amphitheater, their various breathing apparatus, translation devices, and environmental suits creating a cacophony of mechanical sounds that underscored the tension in the air. The humans had arrived with a fleet, not the small diplomatic escort that protocol demanded, but a full battle group of 12 ships that had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system with their weapons powered and shields raised. They transmitted proper diplomatic credentials and requested emergency session status, but they'd also made it clear that they weren't taking no for an answer. Honored colleagues, Sarah began, standing at the central podium with the same calm demeanor she'd maintained for 5 years of careful diplomacy. Humanity comes before you today with information of critical importance to the survival of galactic civilization. Moderator Pelthak's gas-filled sphere bobbed uncertainly. In 5 years of human participation, they'd never requested emergency session status. They'd never arrived with a military escort. Most troubling of all, they'd never spoken with the kind of grim certainty that Ambassador Chun was displaying. The Galactic Council recognizes the human representative, Pelthak announced formally, though he couldn't quite keep a note of uncertainty out of his translated voice. Sarah activated a holographic projector that filled the chamber's central space with star charts showing the outer rim territories beyond the current borders of known space. For the past 18 months, human intelligence operations have been investigating anomalous sensor readings from the galactic periphery. What we discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about the nature and history of our civilization. The hologram shifted to show ship configurations unlike anything in Council databases. Sleek, organic-looking vessels with hull compositions that seemed to absorb sensor sweeps, weapon systems that defied conventional classification, and propulsion signatures that suggested technology far beyond current galactic standards. We have confirmed the existence of a hostile civilization that has been operating in the shadows of galactic space for millennia, Sarah continued. They call themselves the Devourers, and their purpose is the complete consumption of all other sentient life. A wave of incredulous sounds rippled through the chamber. The very concept was so alien to galactic thinking that many species struggled to process it. Galactic civilization had been built on principles of coexistence, trade, and diplomatic resolution. The idea of a species dedicated to the literal consumption of other civilizations was almost incomprehensible. Ambassador Geltar of the Kethran hegemony raised her manipulation tentacles in a pattern that indicated formal skepticism. With respect to our human colleagues, this claim seems extraordinary. If such a civilization existed, surely our long-range sensors would have detected them. Sarah's smile was the same polite, diplomatic expression she'd worn for years, but now it carried undertones that made several species shift uncomfortably in their seats. Our investigation revealed that the Devourers have been operating for approximately 10,000 years. During that time, they have completely consumed 47 separate civilizations that were previously part of galactic society. The hologram shifted again, showing historical records and population data from species that had simply vanished from galactic civilization over the millennia. The Kithira, who'd withdrawn from the Council claiming philosophical differences. The Veltar Collective, who'd chosen isolationism after a brief period of active participation. The Zafrani Empire, whose territory had been found empty when Council ships finally investigated their lack of communication. In each case, Sarah explained, the official records show these civilizations choosing to withdraw from galactic society for various cultural or philosophical reasons. The reality is that they were systematically hunted and consumed by devourer fleets. Dr. Elizabeth Kurowski stepped forward, activating additional displays that showed biological and technological analysis from captured devourer assets. The devourers possess the ability to perfectly mimic the appearance and behavior of other species. They infiltrate target civilizations over periods of decades, studying weaknesses and gathering intelligence before the main fleets arrive. The chamber erupted in a dozen languages as the implications sank in. If the humans were correct, then every species in the Council could already be compromised. Any individual could be a devourer infiltrator, any ship could be scouting for invasion fleets, any diplomatic exchange could be part of an elaborate intelligence operation. Honored human representative, called Matriarch Saluna of the Ethereal Collective, her musical voice carrying harmonics of deep concern. If your information is accurate, what do you propose we do about this threat? Sarah's expression grew even more serious. If such a thing were possible. Based on intercepted communications, the Devourers are planning a coordinated assault on all major Council worlds within the next 2 months. They intend to simultaneously attack every population center and military installation in known space. Impossible, declared Ambassador Zaireth of the Zephyrian Commonwealth. Our combined fleets number in the tens of thousands. No single civilization could hope to defeat the united military might of the Galactic Council. Sarah activated another holographic display, this one showing fleet compositions and strategic deployments that had been painstakingly assembled from captured Devourer data. The scale was staggering. Thousands of ships, each larger and more heavily armed than Council capital vessels, positioned in staging areas throughout empty space. The Devourers have been preparing for this assault for centuries, she explained. Their fleet significantly outnumbers our combined forces, and their technology is superior to anything currently in Council arsenals. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives contemplated the implications. If humanity's intelligence was accurate, galactic civilization was facing extinction within weeks, and there was little they could do to prevent it. However, Sarah continued, and something in her tone made every being in the chamber focus completely on her words. Humanity has developed a potential solution. She gestured to David Martinez, who activated a new series of displays showing human ship designs that looked nothing like the vessels that had brought the diplomatic mission to the Council chambers. These were sleek, predatory craft that seemed designed for speed and stealth rather than the diplomatic utility and defensive capability that characterized most galactic vessels. Over the past 6 months, humanity has been developing new military technologies based on analysis of captured Devourer assets. We have successfully reverse-engineered their stealth systems, their weapon technologies, and their tactical doctrines. Ambassador Geltar's tentacles writhed in patterns indicating extreme skepticism. You claim to have advanced your technology by centuries in mere months? Sarah's smile became something that would have been perfectly at home on a hunting cat. Humanity has always possessed a talent for rapid adaptation when faced with extinction-level threats. We've simply applied that talent to the current situation. What she didn't mention was the cost of that rapid advancement. Human space was now dotted with research stations where volunteers had subjected themselves to devour biological modifications, learning to think like predators in order to understand predatory technology. Entire populations had been converted into military production centers, building weapons and ships based on principles that violated several galactic conventions on ethical warfare. Furthermore, Sarah continued, humanity is prepared to share these technologies with all Council species, along with tactical intelligence and strategic coordination necessary to defeat the Devourer invasion. The offer hung in the air like a physical presence. In their desperation to survive, the galactic powers would be forced to accept technology and tactics that would fundamentally alter the nature of their civilization. They would have to become predators in order to defeat predators. "What do you require in return?" asked Moderator Pelthak, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Full military command authority for the duration of the crisis," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Human forces will coordinate all defensive operations, with Council fleets integrated into our command structure under human leadership." The chamber erupted again, this time in outright protest. The idea of placing their military forces under the command of a species that had been part of galactic civilization for less than 6 years was almost as shocking as the threat they were meant to defend against. "This is unacceptable," declared Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Defense Force. "We cannot surrender military sovereignty to—" His words were cut off as every light in the chamber suddenly died, plunging the vast space into absolute darkness. Emergency systems activated moments later, bathing everything in the red glow of crisis lighting, but the message had been delivered with surgical precision. "I apologize for the demonstration," Sarah said calmly as the normal lighting returned, "but I wanted to illustrate a point. The system's failure you just experienced was caused by a single human operative using technology derived from Devourer's stealth infiltration techniques. One person operating from outside this facility just demonstrated the ability to penetrate your most secure location and disable your primary systems. The implications were terrifying. If humans could do that with captured alien technology, what could the actual Devourers accomplish? The choice before you is simple," Sarah continued. "Accept human military command and have a chance of survival, or maintain your independence and face extinction within weeks." Matriarch Siluna was the first to speak after several minutes of silence. "What guarantee do we have that humanity will relinquish command authority once the crisis has passed?" Sarah's expression didn't change, but somehow her smile became even more predatory. "You have the same guarantee you've always had in galactic diplomacy. Our word as civilized beings committed to peaceful coexistence." The words were perfectly diplomatic, but every being in the chamber understood the subtext. Humanity was offering to save galactic civilization, but the price would be accepting a new reality where humans held ultimate authority over military affairs. They could accept the offer and survive as junior partners in a human-dominated galaxy, or they could maintain their pride and face extinction. It wasn't really a choice at all. The ethereal collective, Psi Luna announced formally, accepts the human proposal. One by one, the other species followed suit. The Kethran Hegemony, the Zephyrian Commonwealth, the Mordun Federation. Within an hour, every major galactic power had formally surrendered military command to a species they'd regarded as primitive newcomers just months earlier. Sarah Chun accepted their surrender with the same polite grace she displayed throughout 5 years of diplomatic theater. But inside, she felt the satisfaction of a predator whose long hunt had finally reached its conclusion. The Devourers were real, and they were coming. But they were about to discover that they weren't the only apex predators in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the battleship Predator's Edge, watching the tactical displays that showed the largest space battle in galactic history unfolding across 17 star systems simultaneously. The Devourer invasion had begun exactly as human intelligence had predicted, with coordinated strikes against every major population center and military installation in Council space. What the Devourers hadn't expected was the reception waiting for them. Status report, she requested, though she could already see the broad strokes of the battle from the holographic displays surrounding her command position. Enemy fleet strength is exactly as projected, reported Captain Torres, who had been promoted rapidly through the ranks during humanity's 6-month military buildup. 3,700 capital ships, approximately 15,000 escort vessels, staging from 23 different approach vectors. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical situation with the calm focus that had served her well through decades of intelligence work and months of military command. The Devourer fleet was indeed massive, representing the culmination of millennia of preparation and technological advancement. Under normal circumstances, it would have been more than sufficient to overwhelm galactic civilization's defenses. These are not normal circumstances. Human fleet disposition. All battle groups are in position and operating according to plan. Stealth infiltration units have successfully penetrated enemy formation perimeters in 14 of 17 combat zones. The tactical display showed the fruit of 6 months of frantic preparation. Humanity had built not just ships, but an entirely new kind of military force designed around principles that galactic civilization had never seriously considered. Instead of massive fleets engaging in traditional space battles, human forces operated as coordinated hunting packs that struck from stealth, inflicted maximum damage, and vanished before effective retaliation could be organized. Council fleet status? All species have committed their available forces as requested. They're maintaining defensive positions around primary population centers while our hunting groups engage the main enemy formations. Sarah almost smiled at the diplomatic phrasing. The Council fleets were indeed maintaining defensive positions, but not by choice. Human command had made it clear that any Council ship that broke formation without authorization would be treated as a potential enemy infiltrator and destroyed without warning. The various galactic powers were discovering that accepting human military authority meant exactly that. Enemy casualties? Captain Torres consulted his displays, and this time he couldn't suppress a grin. Significant. The Devourers are having trouble adapting to our tactical doctrine. They keep trying to engage our main formations, but we don't have main formations. That was the key insight that had shaped human military planning. The Devourers had spent millennia studying galactic military doctrine, learning how Council species fought, preparing counters for every known tactic and strategy. They were supremely prepared to defeat fleets that operated according to established principles of space warfare. Humanity had thrown those principles away entirely. Instead of massive capital ships with heavy armor and powerful shields, human vessels were fast and stealthy, designed to deliver devastating strikes and disappear before the enemy could respond. Instead of defending territory, human forces abandoned anything they couldn't hold and focused on destroying enemy assets. Instead of protecting civilian populations, human command had quietly evacuated key population centers and filled them with automated weapon systems that turned entire planets into traps. Admiral, called Commander Kim from the intelligence station, we're receiving reports from Hunting Pack 7. They've successfully infiltrated the enemy command vessel. Sarah felt a moment of genuine satisfaction. Hunting Pack 7 was led by Dr. Carmen Yanez, who had volunteered for biological modification that allowed her to pass for a Devourer infiltrator. The process had been unpleasant, but it had given humanity the ability to turn the Devourer's own tactics against them. What's their status? They've accessed the enemy command systems and are transmitting tactical intelligence in real time. Also, Kim paused, checking her readouts. Dr. Yanez reports that she's in position to execute the final phase. Sarah Chun had spent her entire adult life making difficult decisions, but what she was about to authorize would have been unthinkable to the diplomatic ambassador who had sat in council chambers just months earlier. The final phase of humanity's defensive plan involved tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. It would also ensure that the Devourers never threaten galactic civilization again. Authorization granted, she said quietly. Execute final phase. The tactical display began showing new data as Dr. Yanez's team released a biological weapon into the Devourer command ship's life support systems. The weapon had been derived from humanity's analysis of Devourer biology, specifically engineered to target the unique cellular structures that allowed them to mimic other species. Within minutes, every devourer on the command ship began reverting to their original biological form. The perfect mimicry that had allowed them to infiltrate countless civilizations for millennia simply stopped working, leaving them trapped in bodies that could no longer maintain their disguises. But the biological weapon did more than just disable their shape-shifting abilities. It spread through the Devourer fleet via their own communication systems, transmitted as an electromagnetic carrier wave that their technology couldn't distinguish from routine fleet coordination signals. Enemy fleet status is changing, reported Torres, studying his tactical displays with growing amazement. They're turning on each other. Sarah watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the Devourer fleet began tearing itself apart. The biological weapon had done more than disable their shape-shifting abilities. It had triggered an immune response that caused their bodies to reject any foreign biological material they'd absorbed over the millennia of consuming other civilizations. Devourers who had incorporated Kethran neural enhancements were dying as their brains rejected the foreign tissue. Those who had absorbed ethereal sensory organs were going blind and deaf as the modifications failed catastrophically. Thousands of years of biological theft were reversing themselves in a matter of hours, and the pain was driving the survivors into homicidal rage. Admiral, Kim called from her station. Dr. Yanez is reporting that the enemy command structure has completely collapsed. Individual ship captains are attacking anything in range, including other Devourer vessels. The largest space fleet in galactic history was committing suicide, and they didn't even understand why. What about our infiltration teams? Sarah asked. All human personnel extracted successfully. Dr. Yanez reports that the biological weapon is species-specific to Devourer genetics. No adverse effects on human or council biology. Sarah nodded, though she knew that statement wasn't entirely accurate. The biological weapon would indeed leave humans and council species physically unharmed, but the psychological effects of what they'd just witnessed would linger for generations. Galactic civilization had just seen humanity deploy a weapon that could rewrite biological reality itself. Admiral, Torres reported, enemy fleet cohesion has dropped below 10%. Remaining vessels are either retreating or continuing to engage each other. Threat assessment indicates minimal danger to Council territories. What about survivors? Long-range sensors indicate approximately 300 Devourer vessels have successfully withdrawn from the combat zone. However, based on the biological weapon's propagation pattern, any survivors will be dealing with progressive biological degradation for the foreseeable future. Sarah studied the tactical displays showing the wreckage of the Devourer invasion fleet scattered across 17 star systems. In less than 6 hours, humanity had defeated a threat that had been preparing for millennia. But victory had come at a price that extended far beyond simple military casualties. Open a channel to all Council species, she ordered. The communication system connected her to the leadership of 43 different civilizations, all of whom had spent the past 6 hours watching humanity demonstrate capabilities that exceeded their worst nightmares. The humans had not only defeated the Devourers, they had done so using weapons and tactics that redefined the very nature of interstellar conflict. Honored colleagues, Sarah began, using the same diplomatic tone she'd employed for years of careful negotiation. The Devourer threat has been neutralized. Council territories are secure, and normal commerce may resume immediately. A chorus of responses came back, most expressing gratitude and relief, but Sarah could hear the undertones of fear in every voice. They were grateful for salvation, but terrified of their saviors. However, she continued, recent events have demonstrated that galactic civilization faces security challenges that existing institutions are not equipped to address. Therefore, humanity will be implementing new defensive measures to ensure that similar threats cannot develop in the future. Ambassador Geltar's translation device rendered her bioelectric communication into standard galactic. What kind of defensive measures? Sarah's answer was delivered with the same polite diplomacy she'd always employed, but now it carried the weight of absolute authority backed by overwhelming force. Effective immediately, all interstellar military activities will be coordinated through human command structures. All new technology development will be subject to human security review. All exploration of unknown territories will be conducted under human supervision. The implications were crystal clear. Humanity was not offering to help protect galactic civilization. They were announcing that they had assumed permanent control over it. Furthermore, Sarah continued, to ensure the continued security of all Council species, human monitoring stations will be established in every inhabited system. These stations will provide early warning of any external threats and coordinate rapid response capabilities. Matriarch Luna's musical voice carried harmonics of resigned acceptance. And if we refuse these protective measures, Sarah's smile was the same diplomatic expression she'd worn for years, but now everyone understood what it really meant. Then, you'll be free to face the next existential threat without human assistance. The communication channel fell silent as the representatives of galactic civilization contemplated their new reality. They could accept permanent human oversight and maintain their physical survival, or they could assert their independence and face whatever dangers the universe might contain with their own resources. It wasn't really a choice at all. One by one, the Council species formally accepted humanity's protective authority. The Ethereal Collective, the Kethran Hegemony, the Zephyrian Commonwealth. Within an hour, every major galactic power had agreed to become a protectorate of human space. Admiral Sarah Chun accepted their surrender with the same gracious professionalism she displayed as a diplomatic ambassador. But as she looked out at the stars from the bridge of humanity's flagship, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 5 years ago, humanity had been a minor species pleading for recognition from the established galactic powers. Today, they were the apex predators of known space, having demonstrated that sometimes the most dangerous hunters were the ones who looked harmless until the moment they decided to feed. The galaxy had learned too late that humans were never really the diplomatic species they'd pretended to be. They were predators in diplomats' clothing, and now that the mask had finally come off, there was no putting it back on. Galactic civilization would survive under human protection, but it would never again mistake humanity's careful politeness for actual weakness. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human dominion had begun.